Welcome to Indie Game Wishlist Part 3, where I want to talk about how to make your player go, wow, I haven't seen that before. So this workshop is designed to help you increase your game's wish list. Specifically, it's designed to help you, find diehard fans for your game and build your audience before your game launches. Because if you can attract like-minded people to love your game, you will increase your chances of selling more game copies at launch. But here's the problem. If a person lands on your Steam page and doesn't know, what's in it for me in less than 3 seconds, then you'll never attract that diehard fan. And that's what marketing is all about, right? It's creating communications to attract your target and then letting them know what's in it for me. And marketing isn't about, entertainment. It's not about, trying to be creative. It's not trying to hype up your game. It's not about, trying to convince somebody to buy something. And it's not about branding. And I mean, don't get me wrong, when your studio becomes huge and, a lot bigger, then, being entertaining, branding, hyping, hard selling, all of those things are really important, but only if you already have a huge customer base, but not right now. Right now, when you're a small indie game dev and nobody knows about you and you have, very few customers, then marketing is all about putting your game in front of that person and clearly telling them what your game is and then what the player will experience or feel playing the game, right? So you see, small indie game marketing is all about getting them, your player, to convince themselves that they want to buy your game and wishlist your game. And it's all about building that genuine relationship with that, prospective fan one by one. So let's get to work right now. Let's get clear on what your game is and then figure out, what your player will experience and feel when they play your game. So let's work on, what's in it for me, and let's figure out your game's biggest appeal. And don't worry right now, later in the workshop, we'll work on, getting more traffic to your Steam page. But first, let's optimize your marketing message so that the player, clearly knows what your game is. And then let's figure out what's your most appealing part of your game. And then let's use that appealing, part to attract players. So if you're a small indie game dev, with a small niche game that is hard to sell and you want more wish lists, then here's exactly what you need to know and what to do. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is your game's biggest appeal, right? So like I mentioned before, in later parts in this wish list, we'll work on, strategies to get more players, more traffic to your Steam page. But before we do that, we need to work on your game's marketing. It's basically your message, right? We need to figure out a way to communicate your game's features so that when a player lands on your Steam page, they go, man, I haven't seen that before, right? They want, that kind of reaction. So in other words, let's work on your game's appeal. And let's work on making that experience of landing on your Steam page so memorable that the player, wants to wish list your game because they don't want to forget about you. So when you, launch your game. And that's the goal here, right? That's the reason why we're, trying to get wish list. It's not about, growth at all costs, like I mentioned in part 2. And it's not about, trying to get as many wish lists as you can, just that number, right? It's all about, connecting with your target player and building that genuine relationship with, like-minded people. And then the sole purpose, of getting a wish list is so that the player has an easy way to keep track of your game so that when your game launches, they don't forget about you. So then how do you exactly do that? Well, your best marketing asset is your game's features. And that's because your game's features are what makes your game, appealing to players, right? But just showing off your features isn't enough. In fact, if you just talk about your features, it's going to make your game sound like all the other thousands of games, right? It's going to sound generic. And that potential diehard fan is lost forever, right? So to avoid, losing potential fans, you need to clearly explain what your features are and what the player will get, the experience or what they'll feel when, you play those features, right? So in other words, you need to show and tell them why your game is appealing. So let me show you exactly what I mean with a quick example. So let's pretend it's the long weekend and the last thing you want to do is do yard work, right? And you're thinking about, hiring somebody else to, cut your lawn and do other stuff. So then you go into your mail and you got 2 flyers, right? The first flyer is just this generic flyer that basically shows off the features, right? So I have, Dariusz lawn care, quality lawn care at a great price. And then I have the phone number and then email, how to contact me, right? And then you have a second flyer that says, don't spend your long weekend doing yard work. Lawn care services starting at $25 per 500 square feet. Done in 1 hour, 100% money back guarantee. And then, all the info to how to contact me. So the first flyer basically, explains the features, right? Quality, lawn care at a great price. But guess what? People expect that with lawn care, right? There is, nothing appealing with these generic features. And you know what? It's the same thing with indie game and their features, right? Say a game dev is making a turn-based, gothic, roguelike RPG game, but guess what? So what, right? These features aren't enough just to get attention because a lot of games have those features, right? There's nothing appealing about just showing off your game features, right? Now let's move on to my second flyer. This flyer will sell more because it's less generic and it tells the person what's in it for me. It clearly describes what the person will get, how much it costs, and what they'll benefit. So basically somebody else is going to cut your grass while you enjoy the long weekend without doing any chores, right? So this is what good game marketing does too, right? So for example, let's look at Darkest Dungeon. Yes, it's a gothic, turn-based roguelike RPG, but they went one step further and not just talked about, the features, and they clearly described in their marketing how, the stress level of each hero increases with further exploration and combat, right? So they clearly defined what these features do. And even better yet, they named their system, their affliction system, right? And if you watched my video on, naming your systems, you know why naming systems is so important. But do you see what I mean when I say, features aren't enough? So like when you get a Steam page and just list all the features, that's not enough to get attention and get a person motivated to wishlist your game, right? You need to go one step further and clearly show the player what's in it for me. And again, why? Well, because when you clearly describe what your game is and what the player will get, it's easy to see the appeal, right? And remember, you only have 3 seconds to sell your game. And a player isn't, going to do the mental work or the mental gymnastics to try to figure out what's in it for me. They want you to do that, right? So just like in Darkest Dungeon, they clearly spelled out their affliction system in their marketing, on their Steam page, and because they knew that players love, this kind of stress system, right? And they leaned into this kind of appeal really hard in their marketing, and this appeal helped them, differentiate their game from other games, right? And more importantly, it made the player go, whoa, that's cool. I haven't seen that before in this genre, right? But here's the funny thing. This system where you have to, manage, stress is not new, right? The Expeditions series, I like those games. I played them a lot. XCOM, and there are a lot more, games have this kind of system where you have to deal with people's stress, right? But my point is, Darkest Dungeon took an appeal that a lot of gamers have, the stress management, and they used that as their main marketing focus, right? And it's like, my second flyer, when I'll say, I'll cut your grass for you so you can have the long weekend off, right? That has a lot more appeal than just me saying, Darius's lawn service, right? It's the same with, Darkest Dungeon. They took, something generic, like a stress system that a lot of games have, and made it more appealing by clearly describing what the system is and what the player gets to do, right? All right. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's get down to work and let's start creating your own, affliction system, right? Let's work on finding that one cool, appealing part of your game so that will get a player to know what's going on in 3 seconds. So to do that, let's break down your game's features and try to discover your own unique system that will help you differentiate your game from all the others, right? Because if you can clearly define what makes your game appealing, then when your target player lands on your Steam page, it will clearly, show them and tell them what's in it for me in less than 3 seconds. And again, you don't want the person, to do all this mental work. You got to do this kind of work so they can understand what's going on with your game and why they should play it, right? Okay, so let's move on. Let's get into the step-by-step guide. And so in this part, I want to talk about how to make your game more appealing. And in this part, we'll just work on organizing your game's best features. And then in part 4, in the next part, we'll work on what your player will get. And we'll work on trying to discover, your game's best appeal. But for now, right now, let's just start slow and let's just get organized, right? And again, the reason why you're doing all this work is because when a player lands on your Steam page, you don't want them to go, oh, just another generic indie game, right? You want them to go, oh, cool, I haven't seen that before in this genre, right? So let's work on that right now. And here's what you need to do. Okay, so I put together a one-step action plan. So basically what I want you to do is name 3 features from your top 5 tags. So if you remember in part 2, I had you come up with your top 5 Steam tags, right? So go open that document. So once you have it open, what I want you to do is under each tag, or under those 5 tags, I want you to name 3 features for each tag. As an example, here's my top 5, Steam tags, and below the 3 features that I came up with, right? And again, in the description below, there's a blueprint for part 3 where I have all this information to help you, do this exercise. And don't worry if your work isn't perfect. The idea here is to get organized first, right? So write down the first thing that comes to mind. And if you're having, trouble coming up with 3 features for each tag, then maybe answer this question: what will the player do, right? Just a simple question that will help you come up with 3 features for each tag. Okay, great. So download that blueprint and do the exercise. And then in part 4, we'll turn your features so they don't sound boring and generic and make them more exciting to players and get them, the player to go, cool, I've never seen that before, right? All right, my name is Darius. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you got one good idea to help you find more wish lists so that your game, is a financial success. All right, see you in part 4. Later.